The creation of synthetic fertilizers is one of the most important inventions of all time. Over half of the world's food is produced using nitrogen-based fertilizer. Without these fertilizers, the world would only be able to feed about 4 billion people, which is half of the current world population. In this video, we'll look at the role fossil fuels play in the production of nitrogen-based fertilizers, as well as environmental concerns, current political turmoil, and future solutions to fertilizer issues. To understand the role that fossil fuels play in the creation of nitrogen-based fertilizers, we have to know a little bit about the Haber-Bosch process. The Haber-Bosch process is named after its inventors, German chemists Fritz Haber and Karl Bosch, who developed it in the first decade of the 20th century. The Haber-Bosch process converts nitrogen and hydrogen into ammonium. The process injects nitrogen and hydrogen into a closed system and then adds pressure and heat to encourage the production of ammonium. The ammonium gas then passes through a pipe to a cooler and a condenser, where it turns from a gas to a liquid. This allows the ammonium to be separated from the nitrogen and hydrogen gases. This is a very simplified version of the process, and I would recommend this video by Cognito if you would like a more in-depth explanation. The nitrogen used in this process is fairly easy to secure, as the air is 78% nitrogen. The hydrogen, however, is more difficult to produce. Currently, around 95% of hydrogen is produced from fossil fuels, mostly natural gas and coal. The Haber process uses immense heat and pressure. The heat and pressure are also generated through the burning of natural gas and coal. You can further see the correlation between fossil fuels and ammonium production if you look at which countries are the top producers of natural gas and coal. China and India are the two largest producers of coal, and the US and Russia are the top producers of natural gas. These four countries are also the largest producers of ammonium in the world, as they have cheap access to the fuels used in its production. Nitrogen fertilizers have been linked to several environmental issues. Greenhouse gases are produced from the process that creates the fertilizers, and when the fertilizers are broken down into the soil, they can produce nitrous oxide. Runoff from the fertilizers can end up in bodies of water, causing harm to ecosystems. Estimates on greenhouse gas emissions from fertilizers range from 1 to 5% of total greenhouse gas emissions. This means that greenhouse gas emissions from fertilizers could be as high as 2.5 billion tons per year. Once the fertilizers have been applied, plants, on average, can only use half of the nitrogen from the fertilizers. The other half stays in the soil, which becomes runoff. The portion that does stay in the soil is broken down by microbes, which produce nitrous oxide, a greenhouse gas that is 300 times as potent as CO2. Also recall that the main component in the chemical process used to produce the fertilizer is methane, another greenhouse gas that is considered to be 28 times stronger than CO2. We can look at the top 5 producers of ammonium fertilizer and see that they are also the largest emitters of CO2, methane, and nitrous oxide. Fertilizers are not the only cause of these emissions, so this is not a direct correlation. It should also be noted that greenhouse gas emissions from fertilizer production will be significantly higher in countries that use coal for methane production, heating, and pressure. From an ecological perspective, the runoff we discussed earlier can leak into lakes, rivers, estuaries, and other bodies of water. One major issue of this runoff is the nitrogen fueling the growth of cyanobacteria in lakes. More commonly called blue-green algae, these blooms are harmful to both humans and animals in the environment. The algae produces toxins and uses up a large amount of oxygen in the water. Because of these climate and ecological issues, some governments have been quick to pass legislation banning the use of nitrogen fertilizers. These legislations have proven to be a blunder, resulting in loss of jobs, economic hardship, protests, coups, and even starvation. In July of last year, the economy of Sri Lanka was plummeting. The country had reached 54% inflation, and 9 out of every 10 families had begun skipping meals and spending their days standing in food lines. The issues all culminated, and hundreds of thousands of protesters took over then-President Rajapaksa's home and set fire to the Prime Minister's home. The president resigned and fled the country. Of course, there's never one issue that causes mass insurrections like these, but at the heart of the issue was the previous year's ban on synthetic fertilizers. Farmers saw the lack of fertilizers decimate their crop production. In an interview with Reuters, a farmer was asked about his grain harvest. He stated that, "Last year we got 60 bags from these 2 acres, but this time it was just 10. Sri Lanka had also been self-sufficient in rice production, but only 6 months after the ban, they had spent $450 million on rice imports. The country saw overall rice production fall by 30%, and the country's main cash crop and biggest export, tea, fell by 18%. Europe has also found themselves struggling with the ban of nitrogen fertilizers. In May of 2019, the Dutch Council of State created a plan called Aanpak-stikstof. The goal of the plan is to cut nitrogen emissions by 50% and by 70% in nitrogen-sensitive areas. Dutch farmers are being forced to cut back on farming operations. The government also has plans to force the sale of farms. They plan to purchase around 2,000 to 3,000 farms and decommission them. As you can imagine, this has not gone over well with Dutch farmers, some of which have been farmers for many generations. The farmers have banded together to conduct protests, the most famous being when thousands of farmers drove their tractors 11 hours across the entire country. The farmers have even gone as far as to create a new political party called the Farmer Citizen Movement, which goes by its Dutch abbreviation BBB. The party aims to give farmers a say in matters of agricultural expansion and laws. The BBB, created in 2019, has found early success. In March of 2023, they won 15 Senate seats, which accounts for 20% of the vote. In May, the United States Senate Budget Committee held a hearing on the real cost of fossil fuels. Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley questioned Diana Furcott Roth, who is an economist at George Washington University. One of the questions asked was, what role do fossil fuels play in food security domestically and abroad? The following clip gives her answer.
Yeah, not only our energy security, but our agricultural production and food security depend on fossil fuels. Raising the price of fossil fuels raises the cost of food, and poor and middle-class people pay the price. Fossil fuels are essential for food production because of nitrogen used in fertilizers. European farmers are being told that because of the aim for net zero emissions, their industry is being phased out, and this disproportionately hurts poor people who have to pay more for food and who cannot afford to do so.
There is no perfect alternative or fix for nitrogen fertilizers, but I have compiled a few of the more popular solutions. I am not arguing for any particular solution, and there are more solutions out there that are not covered in this video. One solution is that farmers can use nitrogen more efficiently. Less and less nitrogen used on farms is being incorporated into the crops. Currently, more than half of the nitrogen being used on farms is washed away into rivers and lakes. Worldwide, nitrogen efficiency usage, shortened to NUE, was about 50% in 1961. It has dropped down to 42% today. Asian countries are doing the worst at using fertilizers efficiently. India's NUE has dropped from 40 to 30%, and China's has dropped from 60 to 25%. If countries were able to achieve a higher NUE, they would be able to use less fertilizer. To accomplish this, fertilizer needs to be more accurately applied to crops. One idea is for fertilizer to be planted near the roots in the form of pellets. This would require much more labor, but would drastically increase the efficiency. Another solution has been dubbed precision agriculture. This idea considers plant health as well as both local soil and climate conditions to create a program that will accurately distribute nitrogen fertilizer where it needs to be and keep it from areas that are already optimized. Some scientists suggest that we reduce food waste and meat consumption, stating that producing feed for livestock uses large amounts of fertilizer, which creates a process that does not use nitrogen efficiently. Animal manure from large farms is another major producer of nitrogen. Some suggest that governments incentivize farmers not to use nitrogen by paying them or giving them tax credits to use a natural fertilizer. Scientists are attempting to reduce the high temperature and pressure required to produce nitrogen fertilizers. This would allow the plants that create fertilizers to use renewable energy instead of coal or natural gas for their heating and pressure. Nitrogen-based fertilizers are key to food security. Without these fertilizers, people will face starvation and civil disorder will ensue, as was seen in Sri Lanka. Coal and natural gas are key in the production of nitrogen fertilizers. If fossil fuel production were to cease, farms would only be able to produce half the food needed to feed the world. The environmental issues of synthetic fertilizers must be balanced out with their production and use. There are several solutions to better control the current use of nitrogen fertilizers that can be implemented immediately. There will be a solution in the future, maybe soon or maybe years from now, but as of today, governments cannot restrict their citizens' use of nitrogen fertilizers. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it educational. Please Please share this video, like, and subscribe, and I would love to hear any thoughts that you have on the topic in the comments. I will include links to all of the sources that I have used into the description. Thanks for watching.